Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of Homescreen. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by See Wah and Minh, who are two product people from Onfido. I'm going to be talking to those guys about how they kind of built and designed their SDK flow. So the actual user experience of having ID checks in place. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about the back-end experience, so how the API documentation works, how you can sort of figure out where all the triggers and the tells are from when there is potentially some quite fraudulent behavior going on. And then finally, an analytics platform. So this is the real kind of the really strong sort of aggregated data set, which shows you where people might be tripping up on the flow, how successful your product is at actually delivering and getting people through the onboarding experience. And then finally, after that, we're going to talk a little bit about the future. So what the guys would envisage being the next steps of the product, and how they can get Onfido involved in other parts of the financial services experience. I hope you enjoy this episode. Just to start off with, I wondered if you could talk, each of you, about how you ended up getting involved with Onfido, what you kind of did before you ended up there, and maybe kind of the route to where you're currently going. Start with you, Minh, if that's all right.
Yeah. So at the very beginning, so I graduated from a business school. My background is in sort of business and international relations, and I really didn't know what was the right type of company or industry. I was, born and educated in France, and I decided to go for different things. So I tried a little bit of consulting in Vietnam. I went on an exchange in a semester in Shanghai. I've worked in the public sector for half a year in Paris. And then I worked for HSBC as well for a year. And then I decided to move to the UK. And that's where I discovered the world of startups and fintechs, and started working for an early stage B2B startup. Started learning about product management, product development, and stayed there for about 2 years. And at this point, I heard about Onfido through some of my contacts, and it was really at that point where I decided to switch, learn from a somewhat larger team, and I was really interested in the problem space, solving the problem of identity online, seeing everyone and the economy moving to remote and online with, I guess, an acceleration this year, even more, and seeing how we could solve that by making it easy for people, but at the same time, safe. And so this was really, really interesting. It felt like a big problem to solve and a really cool team. And that's where I joined about 3 years ago, and saw the company grow a lot since then. So I guess that's how I discovered and joined Onfido.
It's been a bit of a rocket ship so far for you guys, hasn't it? And See Wah, for you are the director of product at Onfido. Do you want to talk about your journey here?
And yeah, so I've been in a product role for 8 years now, and before that, I had been a software engineer. Not in Onfido, but in other companies. I've worked in a number of different startups in London across different industries, from academic research to video streaming, and now identity verification. So actually, before joining Onfido, I didn't really know anything about identity verification or financial services, for that matter. And what drew me to Onfido was the fact that I saw a really wide range of customers that Onfido serves, including charity, banks, on-demand services, car rental. As Minh kind of alluded to earlier on, the space is, the demand for remote identity verification is just growing. And as a product manager, I'm interested in, creating products that are simple, but solve real problems for a large audience. So a product that can scale, basically. Yeah, so I guess I didn't have much domain knowledge before joining Onfido. in fact, I have been working on B2C products as opposed to B2B before Onfido. So my experience was quite removed from what we do in Onfido now. But I think that's a great thing about being a product manager. I think if you're curious, if you're willing to learn, and you're willing to question assumptions, and you try to always understand user needs, customer needs, then I think you would do well in most industries. Of course, product management in software is different from product management in, let's say, Coca-Cola or even Toyota. And having spent so many years working with software teams means, it helps me better kind of manage the technical delivery side of products while being able to focus on the longer term strategic success of product. So yeah.
And specifically for each of you, you're managing very specific parts of the product suite. So See Wah, you are kind of largely responsible, as we'll see from this demonstration, for the customer facing parts of the propositions, so like the software development kits that are built and used by companies, fintechs, that kind of thing, in order to do ID verification sorts of things. And Minh, you take responsibility for some of the more analytical and some of the more back-end maybe services that Onfido offers to its customers. Is this a general kind of illustration about how product teams are sort of generally set up and run within Onfido?
In Onfido, we really believe in team autonomy, and I think we work quite well as a somewhat a bottom-up organization. And teams are built with clear mission and the ability to deliver end-to-end. And like my team, we've got obviously the engineers, mobile engineers, web engineers, as well as designers and user researchers. They work very closely with me. I sit with them. Well, not anymore, obviously. I used to sit with them together in the office. So we tend to set quarterly objectives to solve specific user problems or to drive specific product metrics. And obviously to do that, we have to be very close to the customers and close to our data. I always try to bring kind of customer insights, market insights to a team. And then as a team altogether, we also try to learn directly from our customer integration to understand the integration pain points, to understand the user flow that they're designing, to understand the overall use cases. I guess one thing that I would add is that, being a B2B company in a really fast moving market, we always have requests coming from all directions, and they can disrupt plans, and sometimes we do need to make pragmatic trade-offs, but in a way that's what makes life, I think, in Onfido exciting, because it's all about kind of making the right tactical choices to to sustain the longer term sort of success of a product.
Now we are with 400 people in the company, 100 of them being in the engineering organization. In product, we have around 15 people now. So you can imagine that this organization works at the scale of each autonomous team, but we need ways to make it, to align all these teams into a broader product strategy. So organization of those teams, I guess there's a distinction we make between product lines and product components. Product lines, and I'm sure with a demo later, we'll be able to give a bit of color to this, but product lines are effectively related to specific things or verifications that we do and sell to the market. They have a price tag attached to them, they have a performance level, and so on and so on. And each of them have a mission: build the best document verification system, build the best face biometric system, and so on and so on. And those are teams. They're made of engineers, researchers, product managers, and so on and so on. And then we have, those are the vertical product lines. And then we have product components that cut across multiple product lines. and serve them all agnostically and underpin all of these product lines. And so those are more organized by persona or type of work. So you have a B2B teams, which is the client experience team, working on the acquisition, sort of the conversion, the retention of clients and building the best B2B experience. We have an end user team working more on SDK and the end user experience of onboarding. And then we have teams working on tooling, operational systems that allow for us to scale and process things faster. So this is how those autonomous teams work together into a coherent organization. Now, about goal setting, you have, as always, two competing trends. You have more of the bottom-up trend of teams working on the ground with the product, with customers, bringing market insights, bringing feedback, and then bubbling all that up into product strategy. And then you have more of the top-down approach, which is more, where do we want the company to be? Where do we want to be in 2 years, even though the market is not quite there? Where do we want to be in 5 years? And how do we set the milestones on the way to get there, even though the immediate need of the market might not be there? And so I guess the beauty of that is somewhere in the middle, you hope it reconciles and we build the product that solve the pressing needs from the market of current customers, while at the same time setting the stepping stones to solve tomorrow's problems.
Kind of as a whole, what actually is Onfido? What does it do? Who are you speaking to?
Well, we can start with our mission, right? Onfido's mission is to create an open world where identity is the key to access. We had that like in the office on the wall, and it is a mission that I myself genuinely believe in. And so what we really want to do is to enable. So there's a bit of knocking. Enable people to prove their real identity to the business so that they can access goods and services that they're entitled to. One of the kind of key verticals that we're focusing on is obviously financial services, because they're regulated, they're required by law to know their customer in order to mitigate any risk of money laundering or terrorist financing, etc., etc. So how do we provide that service then? We, as you've seen a bit, we provide a SDK that allows customers to easily incorporate a document and selfie capture experience into their own application.
Yeah.
So the SDK will capture the images that then get sent to our backend, where we have a hybrid of machine learning algorithm as well as human experts who are specialists in document recognition, document verification, who can then analyze document to assess whether it's genuine or not. And also we do a match between the selfie and the document to assert that the person is the rightful owner of the document itself. We want to help a company mitigate that during the onboarding journey, but we also want to be able to do that later on during the user life cycle as well, potentially at big sort of what we call moments of risk when you make a big transaction, etc., etc. We want our product to be very easy to use. We want to minimize drop-off. We truly believe that our product needs to be inclusive and accessible too.
Would you be able to kind of talk to us a little bit about the competition? We've had Reinhard Hochreiter, who is a vice president at Jumio, on the show, and he gave a very compelling sort of demonstration of how their tooling works. But so is that the kind of area that you see yourselves playing in? Our
biggest competitor might not be Jumio. It might just be internal teams who are doing it manually without any software and technology to aid them. Right. It might be the person on site or in the branch, or when you want to hire your car, that is checking your documents with no prior training on fraud detection, and is trying to do it the best they can. Yeah. I would actually argue also that it could be the person at the hotel when you go abroad, back in the days, and they would make a copy of your passport and store it in their locker in a slightly of a dodgy way.
Yeah.
These are the main competitors. The main competitors are non-machine learning aided, no expertise, and very manual, unscalable processes. Then obviously in our space, we have a few people trying to solve that with technology. And that's where I guess our direct competition is.
Yeah.
But I would really, really encourage people to think broader and look at all of the processes and situations and moments of risk that are not at all aided by technology.
Yeah, yeah. So, I guess that's the potentially the jobs to be done way of approaching this kind of thing. It's don't think about the chocolate bar as the opposition to the nougat bar. Think about the chocolate sort of milkshake or something like that. You know, this really interesting dynamic of looking beyond direct competition and seeing where the actual reality of the service that is being acquired is being applied. So that's compelling. And today, the form of that sort of product that we're going to talk about today comes in an SDK format, a software development kit for those that maybe aren't too well acquainted with software development, and then a business dashboard style view. So that includes a range of different sort of bits of information available. And then can we very briefly, just kind of summarizing maybe a sentence or so, what are the kind of business aims when you're building each of these specific tools? So See Wah, for example, if you're talking about the SDK, what's the one thing, what's the golden nugget that you want to get out of that?
So yeah, one thing. So it's hard to pick one thing, but ensuring the quality of the capture is our top priority.
Right.
Well, basically, you know, I always tell people rubbish in, rubbish out. If the images that are being uploaded to our system is of low quality, then we cannot guarantee accurate verification of the user's identity. As we'll see in the demo later on, you know, if a bit of glare is blocking our a data point, or if the user's thumb, because of the way they're holding document, is blocking out certain parts of the document, there's no way, you know, however good our machine learning algorithm is, there's no way we can verify that identity. And ultimately that's going to lead to user frustration as they are asked to retry the process again. So that is a key, you know, the key benefit of the SDK that we want to provide to our customer to minimize the need for re-verification.
I think our mission here is to provide actionable, explainable, and scalable insights for customers to make decisions. So whatever their appetite to risk, whatever the scale of their company, we want to be able to provide the insights so you can make a decision on whether you want to work with this person or not.
Got you. Brilliant. And so we'll start by taking a look at the software development kit flow. So Onfido, I think we've taken a look at a lot of onboarding flows. People will be very familiar with this as a concept, selecting the country and then therefore the ID verification kind of method. And then we find ourselves selecting that driver's license. If it's clear, we upload it and then switch the card over to the back. And then we've got a little error message there instructing us that maybe there's something potentially not quite right about that photo, and then it's corrected. And there we have the kind of facial picture with some instruction below saying kind of, you know, again, telling them what needs to happen in order to kind of make sure that it's successful. So there, the verification is complete. And then there's a little message there saying that we can sort of see the information in the dashboard. Now that's an instructional kind of illustration of how the flow works, but it's actually also, you know, from the experiences that we've seen from companies like Revolut or, you know, any of the other providers that use Onfido and use the software development kit specifically, not plug the services into the back end. It's exactly the same experience. It's the same oval shaped face sort of scenario, the ability to kind of very clearly set warning messages for when things might not be quite right from capture perspective and so on. How do you think about design in this instance? We've seen a very similar flow there to what we see in Revolut, but we wouldn't necessarily expect Onfido to be that present in the design of the Revolut app. In reality, at least from my perspective, I'd want the SDK provider to be kind of as as far, kind of removed as possible from my own design language, but also, having that little trust element there to let the user know that this is a tried and trusted sort of service that they can get their hands on. How does that kind of get thought about in the context of maybe your design teams at Onfido? See Wah?
Yeah, sure. So I think, the important point is, as far as the user is concerned, the overall journey has to be coherent. And that's what we talk about. That's what we think about all the time. Mm-hmm. So even though our SDK is quite visual, that we are talking about UI elements and screens there, and it's quite self-contained, but we never really think about those screens in isolation. Whenever we're talking about problems that we're solving, we are always talking about, discussing the general user context when we are designing those screens. And that for me is really important. And in practice, yes, we do need to make sure that when slotted into different, customers' apps, our SDK doesn't, stick out like a sore thumb. So in practice, we just keep the design as simple as possible, really. We have clear action on each screen. We're not going to overload the users with too much information at any point in time. Yeah. And the key elements are going to be, they are customizable, so that at least from a branding perspective, it will look coherent to the user. Yeah. We do also do, user testing using our customers' app as well to validate some of these assumptions.
Right. So, and you're saying there you have you do user testing on your users there. Does that mean, how do you think about user personas then, in the sense of, it's quite an interesting dynamic and relationship. A lot of the companies that we have here on Homescreen, for example, will be directly B2C. So it's a very clear notion for them to test on users, whilst for you guys, it's essentially, it's like B2B2C, isn't it? So there's an extra, maybe an extra layer in the middle of your direct, the users that you're speaking to. How do you strike that balance and make sure that you've got you've got your eye on who you're building for directly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, back in the days when we started looking at the experience, when we started creating the, MVP of the product, we did have some personas in mind, as we were working quite closely with certain customers of ours. But obviously, as you said, we're a B2B2C company, and our customer base grows. The user base of one customer can be very different from that of another customer, especially when we jump between different verticals. Yeah. And even the context can vary hugely between different use cases as well. So yes, it's a very difficult problem. Identity verification can be applied to multiple points of a user journey, and from that we can see there are quite a few sort of common themes that come up all the time, namely trust, privacy, and convenience. Mm-hmm. So we always think about those three really important points. And asking someone to show their ID is not something that one would do every day. So we have to be very transparent about the process, but at the same time, we have to make it super easy for someone to use. You're probably not used to this process. You don't want to, you can't fall back on past experience. You have to just know what to do intuitively. Another interesting point that I would like to bring up is that we also quite often talk about the physical environment that the user is in as well. You want to access service anywhere on your phone. Are you on the bus? Are you in a dark room where taking a photo of selfie is not practical? Or are you overseas? You're stuck somewhere. You're trying to access your Revolut account, let's say. Yeah. So these are all very interesting kind of questions that we ask ourselves, and and some of these insights to make it into our products. And then just one last point. In the past year or so, we have made a quite conscious decision to make our product more accessible. And for me, that is just an extension of that whole concept of really, getting ourselves to better understand the context, the environment. Really.
Yeah. It's a very interesting one from my perspective, because I would always assume that with a service like Onfido's, where you have, I guess, maybe a panel of or a group of fintechs or other tech companies that you'd work with, then your user base, as it were, is dependent on their user base in a way. The user changes according to what type of user they're getting in. And then as a result, potentially the product is dependent on their experience. Revolut, for example, pride themselves on the ability to get a user through a flow in the smallest amount of time and with the smallest number of interactions. So that then, as a direct product result of them wanting to develop an onboarding flow, which is subtle and kind of quick and intuitive, that kind of therefore, at least influences the agenda. I think you mentioned this earlier, See Wah, which is the notion that, you have a lot of demands coming at you from a lot of places.
Yeah.
That must be an example of that, potentially. On the topic of someone like a Revolut who would use this product, how do they typically approach and come, what's the feedback generally about the software development kits? How do banks think about them? Do they have you had any really weird demands or anything like that from any banks in the past?
Yeah, so we have developed the technology that handles image quality assessment. We have done a lot of user research into how, at least during onboarding, how identity verification, how the whole experience can be more streamlined. But at the end of the day, there are going to be some companies that are more reluctant to rely on third-party technologies for that, because it is a core part of the onboarding. Is such a critical part of the flow. So for different reasons, companies may push back, but what we always tell them is our SDK is free to use. The documentation is public, is out there. When you have a sandbox token, you can integrate straight away. The SDKs themselves that can be imported directly from CocoaPort, Gradle, NPM. We don't hide them. So the integration experience is actually very simple. So just try out and then kind of assess internally whether your internal team is going to be able to create and, more importantly, support an experience like this. So we always try to encourage customer to just try out and see. So yes, I mean, during the integration process, we often get questions. That's great. Those are exactly the kind of feedback that we want to hear. And our SDK has got to where we are now. And
it's been very successful as well, as far as I know. There's been a lot of research out there saying that conversion rates for banks that use Onfido are substantially higher than their direct competitors. The numbers are out there to show that the tool works very well for a bank that's trying to convert a user, and that must be the ultimate thing that you can be kind of delighted with.
That's right. Yes.
Perfect. And then the second part of this experience that we're going to take a look at, specifically with you, Minh, is the idea of this sort of like some more of the kind of the B2B kind of relationship side of things. This is the dashboard view. We're going to start off by taking a look initially at the sort of the document reporting, and here you can see a big sort of list of kind of different sort of elements to the scan that's maybe going on. And we can also see in this point the actual developer area. Now, anyone who's familiar with Stripe API documentation or anything like that know how it to be in any way playing the game from a B2B perspective, your documentation has to be simple and clean. Developers absolutely adore it. And it makes a big difference in their kind of general experience. And, you know, if you get the developers involved, then you probably got the company involved. Minh, could you talk a little bit about what we've just seen there? And kind of, we have like this sort of statuses area more specifically that I'm really interested in from kind of what's going on and what's powering that.
Absolutely. So that's a bit of a behind the scenes moment, because while the end user flow is now quite well known, we wanted to show you a little bit what's happening behind, and sort of once you've done all the pictures and videos and so on, you send them, what happens? Yeah. And I guess there are a few questions that clients want us to answer. They want to know whether the person that has taken the document and the face image is the person they claim to be. Yeah. And so we want to do that with striking a balance between two different things. One is something simple and actionable. So on the one hand, they need to know, okay, do I onboard this person? Do I not onboard this person? Yeah. On the other hand, we want to be detailed and granular and nuanced enough so that they can build more sophisticated logic to adapt to their risk appetite, which might differ by geography, by document type, by type of product. Are you accessing a basic product, or are you grading from a premium product, or are you trying to get access to a higher threshold or higher cap of funds or money transfer? Sure. And so we have this balance to strike. So the way we've tried and solved that is by saying we will provide a high level result. Is good or not good? And then we will provide very granular breakdowns that you have seen here on the dashboard, which is sort of the human-friendly way, but we provide exactly that granularity through an API so that they can be consumed programmatically. Yeah. And we will tell you, if you want to go with the high-level results and integrate that and build your flow, no problem. If you want to go deeper and integrate into one level down of granularity, no problem. If you want to go 2 level downs, no problem. And it could be a journey. You could start high level, and as you discover different risk attack vectors or risk levels in different geographies and segments of your audience, then you can build in that complexity and sophistication. So I guess that's what we're trying to do here. Sure. And we've seen maybe a few instances in there of maybe the risk being quite high, or maybe some warnings being initiated. Yeah. Presumably that means there is not presumably, I'm sure there is a risk model in the background, or maybe some sort of profiling sort of going on in the background. I'm not asking you to explain how machine learning works or anything like that, but just from a very high level, maybe what are the criteria from which a bit of fraudulent behavior is sort of defined, and how would you go about kind of producing that in that way? Yeah. So let's take the example of See Wah's document that you've just showed us. Yeah. It returned a result that we call suspected. Suspected means that we think something is wrong, and we think it's a bad actor. So we would have suspected for that category, but we also have rejected when it's just an image quality problem, or caution when something is not quite right, but it's probably due to not necessarily a fraudulent behavior. Suspected is because See Wah used a forged document to do the demo, and it specifically triggered one of the breakdowns that we call visual authenticity. Visual authenticity is a collection of different verifications. In this particular case, to give you an example, we've had different verifications going on. We had whether the original document is there. So is it a picture of a picture or a picture of a screen? Right. Has it been digitally tampered? Is the area of the face correct, or do we suspect that there was an image printed on top of it? And so are the border correct, and so on and so on? Are the right security features there? So we have a library and logic around different types of security features that we expect from different type of documents. So all the fancy coloring, the holograms, all of these things we would check for. Yeah. Template is this document. Are the different elements and objects matching with what we would expect of that document type, and the font as well. As you might know, the printers use very, very specific fonts that can be recognized, and we can spot that. So all of these verifications roll into what we call visual authenticity breakdown, which roll into a suspected result for this particular document.
Okay. When you were essentially designing that kind of set of sort of like warnings or kind of triggers, was there maybe a set of guidelines that you could sort of call upon? Do you have like a mandated government body which decides maybe this is what fraudulent behavior looks like according to us, and that sort of thing? Is there anything like that you can kind of lean on, or is it all your own development?
That's a very good question, and I think both. So I would say that some government bodies have been observing and adopting some practices around remote identity verification. So we've been in contact with different agencies in different countries to adapt to their requirements, whether it is around fraud detection, but also inclusion and also data privacy. But at the same time, we believe that we are also part of the people shaping the trend in the industry. And so we've done our own research. And something that is quite interesting to us is we have a team, which we call the document specialist team, which is actually primarily made of former border police officers who use their knowledge of offline document verification and try and transcribe this knowledge to inform our research in machine learning. So to see how we can do that in a more of a 2D environment, and in more of a remote environment, an environment where you're not using the highest quality scanner, but you are using people's phones. And so we are using this offline research to feed into our online and remote and machine learning driven research. And then in turn, we share some of that with government agencies as well.
Amazing. So it must be cool to be able to kind of be there and be able to kind of, in a way, inform what's going on from a maybe a policy perspective or from a regulation perspective by the work that's being done. That must be enormously satisfying, I can imagine. Would you talk about your kind of the way that developers have approached Onfido, how they've found working with documentation, and does that reflect the way that you think about presenting them or anything like that?
Yeah, so this is something that is very close to our hearts and mine particularly. So the immense majority of our traffic and verifications are coming through the API alone or API plus SDKs. So as you can imagine, to work with companies that scale radically, and you've mentioned some of the fintechs, we need to be able to provide a great developer experience. So that from the moment they want to integrate with us to the moment they get their first proof of concept working, to prove that this flow is viable and could work for them, to the moment where they're up and running and scaling with us, we want to reduce those time ranges to as short as possible. And so to do that, we want to make sure that we provide the best developer experience possible, whether it's accessing your tokens, playing with the SDKs, playing with documentation, building your first proof of concept. This is why all of our documentation is public. We have our developer hub, our API documentation. We have our backend client libraries. We have our front-end SDKs. All of this is public, and we say we have nothing to hide. This is our tech. We're proud of it. Play with it. And we want to make sure that developers feel the same. And we want to make sure that when they move from one company to the other, should the new company require some identity verification needs, we want them to feel comfortable to say, hey, I've worked with Onfido before. It was great. Why don't you try it? And this is the sweet spot that we want to hit to create economies of scales and network effect in the developer community. So that's something that is very, very, very important to us.
And you also want to kind of endear yourselves to the community of maybe product people or analysts or people that are actually involving themselves with the product on a day-to-day perspective as well. So we'll take a look at the way that your analytics dashboard kind of will look and feel now. So we mentioned here that there is an analytics set of tools available. Really nice sort of panel view here with some nice sort of like tooltips and a good range of kind of customization and sort of change there. We also have some other options below there, so pass rate, completed checks, and then the turnaround rate here, which goes in sort of 3 or 4 different measurables. So would you kind of talk about kind of the metrics that were important for you to surface there for users? You mentioned earlier a little bit of granularity about information that they have available. Does that factor into this particular view as well?
Yeah, so we're working with different types of people on our client side. We have, as you can imagine, more of the developer role, and we've talked about it. We have more of an analyst role that might be in charge of escalations. So we want to help them spot patterns and understand the behavior of their audience on an aggregated level. Sure. So we're also exploring other ways in the future of integrating deeper into some more of a custom data streams to see how we could plug into directly some of their BI and data visualization tooling. So there's some cool things happening on that front.
Yeah, very good, and things to look forward to for users, no doubt. On that note, any kind of big plans for 2020 from a product perspective, from both of you guys' perspective? We'll start with you first, Minh.
So definitely in terms of analytics and data, we're looking at new ways to surface aggregate data so that clients have better insights, not only at the verification level, but also at the scale of their entire account.
Yeah.
When it comes to developer experience, we have a new version of our API docs coming out soon. We have a new version of our developer hub coming out soon. We're expanding our client libraries to new languages, and we are testing sort of new ways to wrap and package some of what we do so that clients can create proof of concepts faster. And then on the sort of trial experience, this is a very important moment for us. And we're also trying new ways so that client can try our product without integrating very fast from the moment they discover us.
And that's good news for what's going on for you guys over on the sort of the SDK kind of side of things as well, See Wah. So I guess my hunch based on what you said is that you're trying to, the plan for this year is to develop further into the flow beyond onboarding for SDK kind of experiences and other API experiences. Is that a fair assessment, or do you have any other big grandiose plans for the year?
Yeah, so definitely expanding the the role the SDK play during a user journey, so that people get to use us more is always good. And then from a slightly different angle, we're always looking at expanding our capability, leveraging what device provide nowadays. The mobile, especially mobile devices, really developing really fast, and we're always looking to push the boundary with further image quality assessment or even enhancement. How to take multiple images and then combine them to make a super quality image. So leveraging the ever increasing phone, mobile or device processing power to do that is one of our goals, and also we're looking at using NFC reader to read e-documents. So if you go through a e-passport gate, you're asked, at the airport, you're asked to take a scan of your passport, and then you're asked to take effectively a selfie. In a way, that's pretty much what we do, scanning a document and take a selfie. So what happens at the e-passport gate is they read the biometric chip on the passports using NFC technology. Now, NFC reader is very popular on phones nowadays. You can Apple has recently opened that API for developers. So we would consider the digital data on a identity document as yet another source of data to help us deliver more accurate and faster verification. So kind of looking at all these different technical capabilities.
Very cool. And all of this, spells great news for companies that would work with you. It shows that there's a lot of development happening. What would you typically expect a company to? How would you typically expect a company to interact if there is maybe a bank or a technology company that's watching this show? We do have viewers out there. Then as we've mentioned before, I mean, your competition is those in-house services. How do you say to those people, come to us, and what's the best way for them to get involved with the product, start trying it out, and see what it can do for them?
Yeah, so I guess on my side, that what I would say is think about your user experience holistically, map the journey, and see where are the moments that your users drop off or where they're frustrated, and based on that, try the product. So if you think that there's a particular product that can help solve a particular pain point that you've already identified, just try the product. At the end of the day, try and get access to a token, go through the documentation, build a proof of concept, test it, and just see how it works for you. I guess that's the main thing I would say. Yeah,
so I guess just to kind of further point to that, obviously a smooth technical integration is very important, but we also we also understand, and actually we want customers to understand that Onfido is not a silver bullet. Do not expect to plug Onfido into your flow and then solve all your onboarding problems. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is customers, they need to be prepared to experiment with their onboarding.
Yeah.
And we support that. We provide, UX best practice to our customer to get them to think about, how identity verification fits in the overall user journey. Is it too early or is it too late? What happens if you're asking someone for an ID card, but they don't have that document with them right now? So sure. These are all the questions that they need to think about, and they need to be willing to experiment with, the onboarding journey. And we'd like to think that we can often partner with our customers to help them explore solution to this problem. And nothing makes me and our team more happy to see a beautifully integrated onboarding journey featuring the Onfido SDK.
Absolutely. And I think, there's great examples, for example, just to plug our own product, 11FS Pulse, you can see real examples of Onfido being integrated into the flow and how those companies have actually figured out where to put the product and what are the right kind of things that they need to do from a customer journey mapping perspective and so on. So I think there's always a full holistic approach to be taken when you're thinking about something like onboarding and, like, for example, ID and verification, like what you're doing. So thank you both very much for taking the time to chat today. I think there's a lot of exciting things going on in the future for you guys, and looking forward to seeing how it progresses.
Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Very nice meeting you.
If you want to hear a little bit more about Pulse, the platform that underlies this show, then head over to pulse.11fs.com. That's essentially a repository of all the different digital banking experiences we've been gathering over the years. It'll show you how stuff's being built, what all the cool things are out there, and what your competitors are doing.